Today is Sunday, April 19th. And I know I don't usually shoot podcast episodes on the weekend, but there's this audio clip going around right now that I want you to hear before I talk to you about anything else. I think it's so important that it needed to be addressed. It's from the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy. It was recorded day before yesterday, I believe. It was translated and posted by multiple open source intelligence accounts on X, and I want you to hear it for yourself. Check it out.
In Persian Gulf and Oman Sea, this is Iranian Sepa Navy calling you on channel 16. The Strait of Hormuz is still closed. We will open it by the order of our leader Imam Khamenei, not by the tweets of some idiot. If you want to pass through the strait, you must ask permission from Iranian Sepa Navy. All vessels that have a connection with our enemies will be targeted if they try to pass the Strait of Hormuz out.
The line is this: we will open it by the order of our leader, not by the tweets of some idiot. The it is the Strait of Hormuz, and the some idiot is Abbas Araghchi, Iran's foreign minister, the man whose literal title includes the word foreign, and his official job duties include executing foreign policy. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, just called their own foreign minister an idiot on tape in the middle of a war while the entire world was watching. And 24 hours earlier, that same foreign minister had announced on X that the Strait of Hormuz was completely open for all commercial vessels. And President Trump, he read that post and within the hour went on Truth Social and thanked Iran. He said that Iran had agreed to never close the strait again. Oil prices dropped 10% in a matter of hours, stocks rallied, and ships started forming up to cross. By Friday evening, the IRGC began publicly contradicting its own government, and by Saturday morning, 20 ships lined up to transit the strait turned around and went back to Oman. By Saturday afternoon, the IRGC gunboats were firing on commercial vessels in the strait, and an Indian oil tanker, the Sanmar Herald, was recorded on maritime radio begging the Iranian Navy to stop shooting at it. I want you to check out the audio from that Indian ship.
Sepa Navy, this is Motor Tanker Sanmar Herald. You gave me clearance to go. My name second on your list. You gave me clearance to go. You are fighting now. Let me turn back.
By Saturday evening, the IRGC declared the strait closed, and it warned that any vessels attempting to cross would be destroyed. The foreign minister had said one thing, the military said the opposite, and the military won. That's what it looks like when a country has two foreign policies and its generals don't respect the civilians who are supposed to be in charge. Now, I'm bringing you this story not to laugh or mock Iran, but because the United States of America is experiencing the exact same dynamic right now, except in our version, the opposition who's doing the vetoing of Trump's efforts aren't even Americans. I'm Dan McKnight. Welcome back to the Bring Our Troops Home podcast. Today, I'm going to walk you through three things. Number one, the Hormuz chaos. What happened, in what order, with what quotes, so you understand exactly how a sovereign government loses control of its own foreign policy in less than 24 hours. Number two, the parallel, which the American press will not draw because it implicates the United States and our greatest ally, but I'm going to go ahead and draw it because somebody has to. And number three, what happens next? Trump issued a statement on Friday that would have been unthinkable under any president in the last 40 years. And the question is whether he means it, whether it holds, and whether the pressure campaign already being mounted to reverse it is going to work. This is a heavy episode, so let's get after it. So before we dig into the timeline, I want to anchor this in the only document that matters. Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution, the power to declare war, not the president, Congress. Not because the founders didn't trust presidents, because they didn't trust anybody that much. And they especially didn't trust any single person acting on behalf of foreign interests. They had just finished fighting a war against a king whose ministers took their cues from the continent, and they knew exactly what it looked like when a government's foreign policy was being run from somewhere else. So they wrote the Constitution so that war could not be started by one man, or by one man talking to another man from another country on the phone. That's the deal. That's the ideal. That's the design. That is what the soldiers that I served with in Afghanistan took an oath to defend. What we're going to walk through tonight is a story about how far from that ideal we've actually drifted and how urgently we need to get back to it. Because if the United States does not take control back of its own foreign policy from a foreign government, from a foreign prime minister, from his lobbyists and his surrogates and our media, then our troops will keep dying in wars that we didn't declare for interests that are not our own on the terms of a de facto shadow cabinet that did not take an oath to our Constitution. So let me walk you through the timeline that is most important. Everything I'm about to say is sourced. Every quote is on the record. All times mentioned will be in Eastern Daylight, although the screenshots will generally show Mountain Standard, as that's where I reside and that's how my computer is set. So Friday morning, April 17th at 8:45 a.m., Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi posts on X, quote, "In line with the ceasefire in Lebanon, the passage for all commercial vessels through the Strait of Hormuz is declared completely open for the remaining period of the ceasefire." 21 minutes later, 21, at 9:06 a.m., President Trump posts on his Truth Social, "Iran has just announced that the Strait of Iran is fully open and ready for full passage. Thank you." It's interesting that he called it the Strait of Iran, but we'll get back to that. Then within 2 hours, Trump goes even further. He claims that Iran has agreed to, quote, "never close the Strait of Hormuz again." He says the U.S. and Iran are working together to remove mines from the strait. He even says that Iran has agreed to suspend its nuclear program indefinitely. The markets, they ran with it. Oil dropped 10%. Stocks surged. Shipping firms started contacting their crews. And then Friday afternoon, Matt Smith, director of commodity research at Kepler, one of the most reliable ship tracking firms in the industry, tells CNBC that despite all the announcements, the strait remains effectively closed. Ships that tried to move were turning back. They've clearly not been given approval to pass through, is what he said. By Friday evening, Iran's parliament speaker, Mohammad Baghir Ghalibaf, who is also the senior Iranian negotiator in the Pakistan-mediated talks, publicly contradicts his own foreign minister on X. He says that the strait will not remain open as long as U.S. naval blockades continue. Iran's semi-official Tasnim News, which is linked to the IRGC, runs an article attacking Araghchi personally. It accuses him of creating various ambiguities. Saturday morning, 20 ships that had lined up overnight to transit the strait turn around and head back to Oman. Saturday late morning, IRGC gunboats opened fire on a tanker transiting the straits, and the United Kingdom Maritime Trade Operations Center confirms it. A second vessel is struck by a projectile. Reuters reports that at least 3 commercial ships came under fire. Saturday afternoon, the audio clip leaks of the IRGC Navy personnel on an open channel in the middle of the operation saying,
The Strait of Hormuz is still closed. We will open it by the order of our leader, Imam Khamenei, not by the tweets of some idiot.
Saturday evening, the IRGC issues a formal statement and, quote, "In violation of the ceasefire agreement, the American enemy did not lift the naval blockade on Iranian vessels and ports. Therefore, starting this evening, the Strait of Hormuz will be closed again until the blockade is lifted." And then they add this: "We warn that no vessel of any kind should move from its anchorage in the Persian Gulf or the Sea of Oman, and approaching the Strait of Hormuz will be considered cooperation with the enemy, and the offending vessel will be targeted." And finally, the IRGC issues one more instruction, and this one is the one that actually matters. They tell all shipping companies that from this point forward, they should only follow updates from Iranian military sources, and that statements from the U.S. president, quote, hold no credibility. Think about what that means. The Iranian military just issued a public written instruction that the American president's statements cannot be trusted, and that ship operators should wait for instructions from the Revolutionary Guard Corps, not from Iran's foreign ministry, not from Iran's president, from the IRGC. And Trump's response to all of it, delivered to reporters just inside the Oval Office, was, "They cannot blackmail us. Check it out."
But we're talking to them. They wanted to close up the strait again, as they've been doing for years, and they can't blackmail us.
But this wasn't blackmail. It was a demonstration. The IRGC showed the world And they showed Tehran who's actually running Iranian foreign policy. And the answer is not the man with the foreign minister title. Now, here's where I want you to really lean in, because I'm about to say the thing that the American media will not say. What the IRGC just did to Arachi is exactly what Israel's been doing to the United States for the better part of a year. Every time the president of the United States has attempted to negotiate with Iran, every single time, a foreign government with no seat at our table, no oath to our Constitution, and no accountability to the American voter has taken direct action to blow up the deal. And I want to be careful and be very precise here. I'm not telling you Benjamin Netanyahu is the only reason we're at war. I'm not telling you that Trump is some helpless puppet. He does have his own agency, but Trump is the commander-in-chief. He's accountable for every order that he gives. That's the deal under our Constitution, but pretending that Israel has not been influencing that would be a lie. What I'm telling you is that when you watch Iran's military directly veto Iran's civilian foreign policy and then turn around and look at Israel's pattern of behavior towards American peace efforts over the last 12 months, you're looking at the same phenomenon. In Iran's case, the veto power sits with the IRGC, and in our case, in America's case, the veto power, the de facto veto power, sits in an office in Jerusalem or Tel Aviv. Now, let me prove it to you. Starting in the spring of 2025, President Trump comes into office and by April has his envoy, Steve Witkoff, sitting down with Iran's foreign minister in Oman. The talks are described by both sides as constructive. By the third round, Witkoff is telling the press that he wants a deal within 60 days. Jared Kushner joins the effort. The Omani foreign minister, the mediator, says significant progress is being made, and Iran puts a three-step proposal on the table that includes moving its stockpile of highly enriched uranium to a third country, even offers to build 19 nuclear reactors with American contracts, and that deal's on the table. Netanyahu flies to Washington in April, and according to reporting in the Times of Israel and elsewhere, Netanyahu came to Washington with one goal: to stop the talks between the U.S. and Iran. Trump sat him down and, with Netanyahu in the room, publicly announced that the United States was opening negotiations with Tehran. Netanyahu was, by multiple accounts and by my own eyes, visibly out of sync. He was upset. He had no idea this was coming. The administration then reports that Trump told Netanyahu in private that he would not provide American support for an Israeli attack on Iran while negotiations were ongoing. That's fair. June 13th, 2025, Witkoff is scheduled to go to Oman that Sunday for another round of talks. And on Friday, 2 days before, Israel attacks Iran. The Israelis strike targets across the country. Trump, according to PBS, was making calls to news anchors that same day, renewing his calls for a deal. Witkoff still plans to go to Oman. It's unclear whether the Iranians will show up, and they don't. That's how the first round of negotiations was killed. Not by Iran, by Israel, while our envoy had a plane ticket booked. And 11 days later, the United States enters the war, dropping bunker busters on Fordo and Natanz and Esfahan. Trump claims total victory, and a ceasefire is announced on June 24th. And on that day, ABC News captures Donald Trump on live camera talking about the ceasefire and how Israel had already violated it. I'm going to let you watch the exact quote. This is the President of the United States, frustrated, unscripted, and here's what he said.
That's not what we want, I'll tell you. And I'm telling you, I'm not happy about that, Israel, either. I got to get Israel to calm down now. I don't like the fact that Israel went out this morning at all, and I'm going to see if I can stop it. Israel, as soon as we made the deal, they came out and they dropped a load of bombs, the likes of which I'd never seen before. The biggest load that we've seen. I'm not happy with Israel. You know, when I say, okay, now you have 12 hours, you don't go out in the first hour and just drop everything you have on them. So I'm not happy with them. I'm not happy with Iran either. But I'm really unhappy if Israel's going out this morning because of one rocket that didn't land, that was shot, perhaps by mistake, that didn't land. I'm not happy about that. You know what? We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Do you understand that?
Did you hear that? I needed you to listen carefully. He said, Israel, as soon as we made the deal, they came out and they dropped a boatload of bombs, the likes of which I've never seen before, the biggest load we've ever seen. And I'm not happy with Israel. When I say now that you have 12 hours, you don't go out in the first hour and just drop everything you have on them. That's the president of the United States publicly admitting that his ceasefire partner dropped the heaviest wave of ordnance he had ever witnessed in the first hour of the ceasefire that he had just negotiated. And he said he was not happy with Israel. Remember that quote. We're going to come back to it. Fast forward now to this current war, February 28th of this year. U.S. and Israel launched their joint air campaign. Trump calls it Operation Epic Fury, and over 3,000 Iranians are dead, according to the most recent forensic numbers. 42,000 civilian sites are damaged per the Iranian government, and among the first targets hit on day one was an elementary girls' school in Manab. The Shajareh Tayyabeh School, if I got that name right. Human Rights Watch has called calls for a war crime investigation because of it. Over 150 girls and teachers reportedly are killed. Most of the girls were between 7 and 12 years old. And over the following weeks, Israel systematically hits hospitals, including the Gandhi Hospital in Tehran and the Delaram Sina Psychiatric Hospital. The World Health Organization confirms over 20 attacks on healthcare facilities. Israel hits pharmaceutical plants and laser and plasma research institutes at the university there in Tehran. They've bombed the hell out of steel production facilities. Netanyahu himself bragged about destroying 70% of Iran's steel production. The B-1 bridge over Tehran was struck while Iranian families were celebrating their version of Nature Day in a surrounding park, and at least 8 people were killed and more than 90 were wounded when Israel attacked a bridge. The Carnegie Endowment analysts have described Israel's approach in Iran as, quote, mowing the grass. The same tactical doctrine applied in Gaza, striking the maximum number of targets, civilian and military, with the goal of degrading the country as a whole, not defeating its military, of breaking its society. Then on April 8th, 2026, the United States and Iran, mediated by Pakistan, reach a ceasefire. Pakistani Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif announced it. He states publicly that the ceasefire included Lebanon. Iran confirmed it. Hezbollah halts its rocket fire. Clearly, everybody thought Lebanon was involved. 10 minutes into the ceasefire, Israel launches what its own military proudly named Operation Eternal Darkness. And approximately 50 Israeli fighter jets, 160 different munitions, strikes against more than 150 locations simultaneously across Lebanon, many in densely populated civilian neighborhoods in central Beirut, hitting civilian homes and apartment buildings. No prior warnings, no evacuation notice. In 10 minutes of coordinated strikes, Israel killed at least 303 people and wounded more than 1,150 others. Hundreds remain buried under the rubble still today. The United Nations human rights experts issued a statement condemning the attack. They called it, quote, the largest coordinated wave of strikes on a country since 1980. UN experts described it as, and I quote again, a blatant violation of the UN Charter, a deliberate destruction of prospects for peace, and an affront to the multilateralism, the UN-based international order. Since March 2nd of 2026, Israel's killed more than 2,000 people in Lebanon, according to the Lebanese government. Over 1 million Lebanese civilians have been displaced. That is 1 out of 5 of the country's entire population. Let that sit for just a minute. 1 in 5, 20% of an entire country's population driven from their homes. Now, I'm going to use a word here that I don't use lightly. I don't like to use it. It's very divisive and very controversial. The word's genocide. The UN has used it when reporting on the Palestinian territories. The UN human rights experts have used it in their statements on Lebanon. South Africa is currently litigating it before the International Court of Justice against Israel. I'm a veteran. I've served in war. I know exactly what combat operations look like, and I know the difference between combat and what we're watching right now. When a sovereign state using American-supplied weapons kills over 2,000 civilians and displaces 1 in every 5 people in an entire country in the space of weeks, when the Israeli military dubs a 10-minute coordinated strike on a residential neighborhoods in another country as Operation Eternal Darkness, I don't know what other word we're supposed to use. I'm not going to pretend that I know any other word that fits. I'm going to call it what I believe it is. It is a genocide carried out against the people of Lebanon and against the people of Gaza before them, and now partly against the people of Iran. And it's being done with weapons paid for by you and by me, by the American taxpayers, in a region where American service members are fighting and dying to defend the ones that are doing it. And who's doing it? America's so-called greatest ally. That's the abusive relationship that our country finds ourselves in. CBS News spoke to diplomats after the April 8th attacks, and the reporting was this. Initially, President Trump had included Lebanon in the ceasefire. It's a fact. Israel had initially agreed. Then, after a phone call between Trump and Netanyahu, the United States changed its position. That phone call is the mechanism. That's how Israel's veto works. Netanyahu calls, Trump objects, and Bibi's media and political surrogates in America take their marching orders and ratchet up the influence campaign. That is not a misunderstanding, which is what the Vice President Vance would later call it. That is a foreign head of state placing a phone call to the president of these United States. Within hours, American policy changing to accommodate a war plan that we never signed. And I haven't even mentioned the opening months of this war when Iran asked Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Oman to urge Trump to press Israel for a ceasefire, offering flexibility on nuclear issues in return. Nothing happened. I haven't mentioned that when Netanyahu came to Washington in February of this year, Stimson Center analyst Barbara Slavin publicly said that Netanyahu was bringing, and I quote, a maximalist demand to the White House. Regime change, total dismantlement of Iran's missile and nuclear programs, positions that were outside what even Trump's envoys had been negotiating towards. The pattern, it's not an accident. The pattern is the policy. Now, 2 days ago, something remarkable happened, and we need to talk about it because it's incredibly important. On Thursday evening, Trump announced a 10-day ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon, negotiated with direct American pressure on Netanyahu. The text of the agreement published by the State Department leaves Israel a so-called right to self-defense against, and I quote, planned, imminent, and ongoing attacks. But on Friday, Trump posted this on Truth Social. Check it out. Israel will not be bombing Lebanon any longer. They are prohibited from doing so by the USA. Enough is enough. Then he went further and said in an interview with Axios, he said it out loud, Israel has to stop. They can't continue to blow buildings up. I am not going to allow it. According to Axios reporting, Netanyahu was, and I quote again, stunned and alarmed. He learned about it from the media. His aides, including Israel's ambassador to Washington, D.C., scrambled to understand whether the United States had fundamentally changed course. Israel officials approached the White House for clarification, noting that Trump's statement contradicted the text of the ceasefire agreement. Axios continued in the reporting, and I'm quoting the analysis directly here, that Trump's declaration that Israel had no choice but to obey would have been unthinkable under any other U.S. administration. Let me tell you why this matters to me. Because Donald Trump, whatever else you want to say about him, just did something that every American president since at least George H.W. Bush refused to do in any comparable situation. He publicly, in writing on his own platform, subordinated a foreign power to an American policy. He asserted that the United States, not Israel, gets to decide whether a war continues on American brokered terms. That is not a thing that American presidents do. That is what a patron does to a client state, which, and I've said it on this podcast before, and I'm going to keep saying it, is the correct relationship. Israel is not our patron. Israel is supposed to be the client state of the United States. We are the superpower. We give the aid. We supply the weapons. Our troops are the ones who die defending their airspace. The relationship has been inverted for a generation, and Trump just flipped it back. So the question for the next 2 weeks, and it's a very serious question, is going to be this. Will Trump hold the line? Or will the pressure campaign already being built against him break through? Now, I was going to close with this segment with that question. And while I'm preparing, the president made another post. At 8:10 a.m. Eastern today, Sunday, April 19th, President Donald J. Trump posted the following on Truth Social, and I'm going to read it to you in full, word for word. Iran decided to fire bullets yesterday into the Strait of Hormuz, a total violation of our ceasefire agreement. Many of them were aimed at a French ship and a freighter from the United Kingdom. That wasn't nice, was it? My representatives are going to Islamabad, Pakistan, and they will be there tomorrow evening for negotiations. Iran recently announced that they were closing the strait, which is strange because our blockade has already closed it. They're helping us without even knowing, and they are the ones that lose with the closed passage, $500 million a day. The United States loses nothing. In fact, many ships are headed right now to the U.S., Texas, Louisiana, and Alaska to load up compliments of the IRGC, always wanting to be the tough guy. We're offering a very fair and reasonable deal, and I hope that they will take it, because if they don't, the United States is going to knock out every single power plant and every single bridge in Iran. No more Mr. Nice Guy. They'll come down fast and they'll come down easy, and they don't take the deal. It will be my honor to do what has to be done, which should have been done to Iran by other presidents for the last 47 years. It's time for the Iran killing machine to end. President Donald J. Trump. Let me take that post apart piece by piece, because every single bit of it tells you something important about who's actually winning in the room. Number one, Trump takes credit for the closure of the strait. He said Iran recently announced that they were closing the strait, which is strange because our blockade has already closed it. But 48 hours ago, he was thanking Iran for reopening it. 24 hours ago, he was publicly accusing Iran of blackmail for closing it. Now, today, the closure is actually his. A U.S. blockade, not an act of Iranian aggression. This is what it sounds like when a president's story about the war changes 3 times in 3 days. This is mission creep in real time. Broadcast from Mar-a-Lago on a Sunday afternoon. Now, number 2, listen carefully to this line. He said, in fact, many ships are headed right now to the U.S., Texas, Louisiana, Alaska to load up compliments of the IRGC. That's the President of the United States celebrating the fact that American oil and gas refineries in Texas and Louisiana and Alaska are filling up with displaced cargo because Iran's shipping has been choked off, because the global energy market is being reshuffled in favor of American suppliers. Now, I want you to hold that line next to a quote I want you to read you from Lindsey Graham. I might actually play it. Let's take a look and see if I've got it. Lindsey Graham went on Fox News back in March, right at the beginning of this war, and I'm going to play the quote directly. I've got it here. He said this.
When this regime goes down, we're going to have a new Mideast. We're going to make a ton of money.
Then Graham continued in the very same segment, and he said this.
Venezuela and Iran have 31% of the world's oil reserves. We're going to have a partnership with 31% of the known reserves.
A ton of money. Make a ton of money. He said that out loud about a war that has so far killed over 3,000 Iranians, displaced 1 million Lebanese, and killed 13 American service members. And today, Donald Trump said the same thing in different words. He said the United States loses nothing. The ships are coming to Texas, Louisiana, and Alaska, compliments of the IRGC. That's not foreign policy. That's a market correction or manipulation. That's a business deal written in Iranian blood. The senior United States senator from South Carolina and the president of the United States are now saying the same thing, but with different vocabularies. And no one on Fox News is going to ask either one of them how that squares with a campaign promise to put America first and to end the forever wars. Now, number 3, the civilian infrastructure threat is back. And this time it's not implied, it's explicit, and it has a president's name at the bottom. And I quote the president again when he said, the United States is going to knock out every single power plant and every single bridge in Iran. No more Mr. Nice Guy. Now, if you want to understand in plain language what knocking out every power plant in Iran actually means, this is not a military target list. This is a terror campaign against a civilian population of 93 million people. It means water treatment plants failing and cholera moving through the countryside in the first week. It means summer temperatures that regularly exceed 120 degrees with no air conditioning, no refrigeration, and no cold storage for insulin. It means hospitals running on generator fuel for the first 3 or 4 days that they have fuel, and then becoming mass casualty sites for the next 4 weeks. Not because they were hit by a rocket or a bomb or anything else, but because the grid that fed them was hit by us. I know what infrastructure strikes do to ordinary people. I served in Afghanistan. I saw what happens when the lights go off in a place that was never ready for it to happen. And I'm telling you, as a veteran and as an American, that what the president just threatened to do to Iran is not a strike package. It's a crime against humanity. It's a deliberate, phased killing of civilians, elderly, sick, pregnant, newborn, for the political purpose of forcing a government to the table. That's not a fair and reasonable deal. That is actually blackmail. And the president just wrote it on his own platform under his own name in all caps. Number 4, the line that tells you who is writing this post. The president said, and I want to remind you, he said, "It will be my honor to do what has to be done, what should have been done to Iran by other presidents for the last 47 years. 47 years. 1979, the Iranian Revolution, the embassy hostages, every grievance the neoconservative right has nursed about Iran for half a century compressed into one arbitrary number. And every piece of American history that does not fit that grievance has been erased from the story altogether. But what about 1953, when the CIA and MI6 overthrew the democratically elected prime minister of Iran because he nationalized the oil? We installed the Shah. We did that. We armed him for 25 years while he ran the secret police. In 1979 revolution, that the 47 years framing treats as the beginning of the Iranian story was the ending of a different story, a story about what happens when the United States overthrows another country's democracy to take its oil. What about 1980 to 1988? The Iran-Iraq War. 8 years, over 1 million dead. We armed both sides. We sold intelligence to Saddam Hussein while he used chemical weapons on Iranian infantry. Or how about July 3rd, 1988, the USS Vincennes, patrolling in Iranian territorial waters, shot down Iran Air Flight 655, a civilian passenger plane over the Persian Gulf. 290 people dead, 66 of them were children. The United States has never acknowledged or apologized. The captain of the Vincennes received a Legion of Merit award. So when the president says the last 47 years, what he's telling you, whether he knows it or not, is that Mark Levin has been in his ear. That's not Trump's history. That's not the history of a man who ran on an America first and no new wars. That's the history of the neoconservative wing of the Republican Party, the wing that Trump ran against. The wing that is winning right now in his own post over his own signature. And speaking about Mark Levin, I want to finish this segment by telling you what he has been doing for the last 2 weeks on Fox News while the president was drifting towards this moment. On April 5th, Mark Levin used his Fox News show, a show that Donald Trump has publicly called himself the biggest fan of, to subtly suggest that the president should consider using nuclear weapons against Iran. Levin cited the Battle of Okinawa. He cited Hiroshima. He cited Truman. He said that millions of American men would die if we didn't drop the bombs on Japan. Many people, including Tucker Carlson, called it out for what it was, a bald-faced lie. A week later, Levin had a nuclear physicist named Brian Cox on his show, and Levin asked him, and I'm going to quote Mark Levin here to make sure I get it exactly right, whether nuclear weapons are, quote, legal today under the laws of war. And when the physicist equivocated, Mark Levin said, sweeping him off with his hand, I'm taking that as a possible yes. Then he closed the show by suggesting viewers read the terms of the Japanese surrender because it says, quote, the Japanese were dug in even after dropping 2 atomic bombs, end quote. That's a United States media figure on national platform lobbying a sitting president whose biggest fan that he is to consider nuclear strikes on a country of 93 million people. That's the echo chamber that Joe Kent described from inside the apparatus. That's the voice Donald Trump is listening to instead of his own former counterterrorism director, instead of his own director of national intelligence, and instead of the intelligence community he was elected to lead. And today at 8:10 a.m., the echo chamber wrote that Truth Social post. Negotiators go into Islamabad tomorrow. The ceasefire expires Wednesday. The president of the United States has just publicly threatened to kill Iranian civilians at scale if he doesn't get the deal that he likes in 72 hours. Now, I'm going to take the liberty of doing something I've never done, and I don't pretend like it's actually going to reach the intended audience, but I want to spend the rest of this episode telling the president something that I don't think he's hearing from anybody else, that there is a third option. So I'm going to apologize in advance. I want to speak directly to the president now, not to anybody else watching this podcast, to him. Mr. President, you laid out 2 courses of action in your post today, a deal that you've already admitted in your own words Iran is not likely to take seriously or risk escalation. Power plants and bridges and civilian infrastructure, the killing machine you promised to end, carried out this time by us. There's a third option, and you need to know about it. It's the one that nobody on Fox News is ever going to suggest to you. It's the one that Mark Levin will tell you is weakness. It's the one that will cost Lindsey Graham his oil partnership and his ton of money. It's the one that will make the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal write that you have betrayed the Abraham Accords. But it's also the right one. It's the one that a veteran would give you if a veteran were in the room. And I'm hoping that someday deliver this message to you personally. But I'm going to give it to you right now. In regards to Iran, leave. Recognize that there is no way to force a positive outcome in Iran. Recognize that the region is not ours to fix, although we've done much to break it. Recognize that every tool of American power that you have brought to bear on this war, the strikes, the blockade, the threats, the ceasefire, the talks in Pakistan or Oman, has produced a situation where Iran's own military is now openly contradicting its own civilian government, where the Strait of Hormuz is closed, where gas is at $4 a gallon, where 13 American service members are dead, where the Houthis are back in the war, and where you yourself are threatening to commit a war crime this coming Wednesday. When a course of action produces those results, the course of action, Mr. President, is wrong. You know who else figured that out, Mr. President? Ronald Reagan. On October 23rd, 1983, a truck bomb hit the Marine barracks in Beirut and 241 American service members were dead. It was the worst single day loss of Marines since Iwo Jima. Reagan took 4 months. He convened his advisors. He watched the mission slide deeper into Lebanese civil war with no definition of victory, no achievable stabilization goal, and no way to leave that did not cost more American lives. And in February of 1984, he pulled every American out. They called it weakness. The neoconservative right called it retreat. The editorial pages called it a humiliation. But history, Mr. President, history has called it wisdom. Reagan understood something that your town, Washington, D.C., has forgotten. Withdrawal is not defeat. Withdrawal is the refusal to double down on a mistake. Reagan didn't apologize for being wrong. He didn't hold a press conference to explain why he had been deceived. He simply recognized that continued American military presence in Lebanon was going to cost more American lives than it could ever save, and he ended it. No grand announcement, no surrender, no ceremony. We just left. He was called every name that you're about to be called. And today, he's remembered as one of the greatest American presidents of the 20th century, in part because he understood something that Mark Levin and Lindsey Graham will never understand. Strength is not the capacity to inflict maximum damage. Strength is the discipline to recognize a losing position and leave it before it costs you more than you can afford. So, Mr. President, we are not in a losing position unless we choose to be. Do not buy into the fallacy of the sunk cost. Let me walk you through why each of your options fails. The negotiated settlement is unlikely to be taken seriously by the Iranians unless you make concessions on enrichment, concessions that you have publicly said you will not make. As we saw yesterday, the Strait of Hormuz, the IRGC is empowered to act without the consent of the civilian leadership. So even if Arachi signs the deal tomorrow in Islamabad, and even if the Speaker of the Parliament signs it, the IRGC will not honor it. You saw this yourself. You thanked their foreign minister on Friday morning, and their Revolutionary Guard called him an idiot on a military radio channel Saturday afternoon. It is not a counterparty capable of honoring the deal. That's the lesson of the last 72 hours. A major escalation, knocking out every power plant, every bridge, will produce a generation of radicalized Iranians who will rally around the flag and around a regime that was 2 months ago facing the biggest protest movement of its lifetime. You will take a regime that was dying and handed the oldest and most reliable rejuvenating drug in an authoritarian pharmacy, a foreign enemy inflicting mass civilian casualties. You will save the Islamic Republic. You will save it with American bombs. And if you choose the worst option of all, the one that I hear some of your advisors are already whispering to you, if you strike the civilian infrastructure, declare victory, and then leave, you will get the worst of every world. You will have killed thousands of civilians. You will have handed Russia and China the most valuable propaganda gift of the 21st century. You will have demonstrated to every nation considering a move away from the dollar, and there are many, that the United States is a country that promises deals, signs ceasefires, and then breaks them by incinerating power grids. That's how you lose the petrodollar. That's how you lose reserve currency status. That is how a half century of American economic primacy ends. With a collapse. With the Truth Social post. Don't double down on failure, Mr. President. Don't fall for the sunken cost trap. You did not start this war. Israel did. Last June, the day before Steve Witkoff was supposed to land in Oman, you entered it because Netanyahu's intelligence services and Mark Levin's radio and TV shows and Lindsey Graham's oil fantasies convinced you it would be easy and quick and a political win. You now know it's not. You are the first American president in 40 years publicly to put Israel back in the box and in the position of being a client state and not a patron. That took courage and you earned it. Now do one more hard thing. Leave. Put America first. For real this time. And bring our troops home. All right, now I want to come back to the regular podcast show. Come back to something that was at the top of this episode. It was the audio clip, the one from the IRGC Navy that said, "We will open it by the order of our leader, not by the tweets of some idiot." I told you at the top of the show that some idiot was Abbas Araghchi, Iran's foreign minister, the man who had posted a minute earlier that the Strait of Hormuz was completely open. And I think that's probably who the IRGC was talking about. But I want to ask you an open-ended question, and I want you to sit with it for just a moment. I don't need you to agree with me. I just want you to think about it. What if the idiot the IRGC was mocking wasn't their foreign minister? What if it was someone else? What if it was a man elected by an overwhelming majority of his countrymen who campaigned on a promise to make his country great again, who promised over and over again, America first, who said with his whole chest on every debate stage and every rally across 2 campaigns, no new wars? What if the IRGC wasn't just putting their own foreign minister in his place? What if part of that message was aimed somewhere else? At the Americans who voted for peace and got war. At the Americans who voted for America first and got Israel first. At the Americans who listened to a president promise no forever wars and are now watching him in year 1 of his second term on day 51 of Operation Epic Fury, something that was supposed to last just a few days, a couple of weeks at the most. With the strait still closed and 13 American service members dead and gas at $4 a gallon, watching him threaten to end an entire civilization on a social media platform. Now, I'm not putting words in the IRGC's mouth. I don't speak Farsi. I don't know exactly who they meant, but I think they probably meant Araghchi. But I will say this. If I were an ordinary Iranian right now, with my government on the verge of total collapse, my country's infrastructure completely shattered, my elementary school children buried in mass graves in Manab, watching the President of the United States tweet out a thank you to my foreign minister for reopening what my own military was about to reverse, and I wanted to send a signal to the tens of millions of Americans who had actually voted for an America First president who promised no new wars, that they had been cast aside by the man who was breaking his own promise. That's exactly the line that I will use. We will open it by the order of our leader, not by the tweets of some idiot. Now, whoever they meant, the message lands on both capitals, both in Tehran and in Washington, D.C. The only question that matters for Americans is whether we hear it. Because whether the IRGC was talking about their foreign minister or our president, the diagnosis is the same. Somewhere in Tehran, the civilians don't run the foreign policy, and somewhere in Washington, D.C., we now understand that Israel runs our own foreign policy. Now, I want to close with the part of the show that matters most, because at Bring Our Troops Home, we don't just describe the problem, we build the infrastructure to solve it. The reason Bring Our Troops Home exists is because we concluded a long time ago from firsthand experience in Washington, D.C., that the federal government is not going to fix this. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee is not going to hold a public hearing on the legal threshold for this war. The House is not going to reclaim Article 1. And Donald Trump, for all the good he has done this week by putting Israel on notice, is one phone call, one Mark Levin segment, one flattering Lindsey Graham op-ed away from reversing course. The only leverage the American people have left is at the state level. And that is what Defend the Guard legislation is all about. That's where we stop the pipeline, because the National Guard deployments to a foreign war require that the Guard should be federally activated under Title 10, and 18 states have already deployed their Guard to the 2026 Iran war, Idaho included. And every governor who allowed this to happen could have said no if they had the Defend the Guard legislation. Now, if you live in a state that hasn't passed or introduced Defend the Guard legislation yet, call your state representatives now. Tell them that your state should not participate in undeclared wars. Tell them that until Congress does its constitutional job under Article 1, Section 8, the state National Guard stays home. Go to defendtheguard.us. You will find a state-by-state tracker, talking points, draft legislation, and the contact info of every legislator who has either sponsored or co-sponsored Defend the Guard in your state. If your legislature or your legislator has already signed on, thank them. If they haven't, ask them why. One last thing before I close for today. I said earlier that the IRGC told shipping companies that President Trump's statements, quote, hold no credibility. I want to be clear about something. I do not agree with IRGC. I do not take the word of Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps over the word of the President of the United States. But here is what I do believe. I believe the credibility of the American president's word depends on whether his word holds up under pressure from the people who whisper in his ear at midnight. Right now, Trump's word is that Israel is prohibited from bombing Lebanon. That is a good and a correct word. My prayer, and I mean this, is that he holds that word against the pressure that's already coming. Because if he does, it might be the single most consequential foreign policy decision of his second term. And if he doesn't, Mark Levin and Lindsey Graham and the rest of the Fox News chorus succeed in dragging him back into his June 2025 frustration when he stood in front of reporters and admitted that Israel dropped the biggest load of bombs he'd ever seen as the ink on the ceasefire was still wet. And we will know. And we will know that the IRGC was right about their country, and that the same thing is true about ours. Joe Kent said it, and Tucker Carlson said it. Hell, Donald Trump himself said it on camera with his own mouth in 2025 when he said they don't know what the fuck they're doing. We know what we're doing. We need to get loud. We need to stay loud. Call your state rep. Sign our petition at bringourtroopshome.us. We'll see you next time.